Thanks for staying with us. You're welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. As federal government continues to grapple with ways to improve the Nigerian economy, the value of the Naira has hit an all-time low against the dollar in the parallel market. The Naira sustained a slide against the United States dollar on the parallel market as it weakened to 1,160 Naira to a dollar on Thursday, lower than the 1,100 Naira it went for the previous day. Since the CBN last week announced the lifting of the forex restriction placed on 43 items on the official market, the nation's currency has been under intense pressure. The central bank has said it will intervene in the foreign exchange market occasionally to boost liquidity after ending the 8-year ban on the 43 items that were restricted from accessing dollars on the official market. Joining us on the morning show to discuss the state of the Naira, which is a serious concern, is Muda Yusu, the Chief Executive Officer, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise. We will also discuss the effect on local manufacturers in Nigeria. Good morning, Mr. Yusu. Good to have you with us this morning.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Steve and Kay.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you very much. All right, let's talk Naira and the dollar and how everybody seems to be perplexed. I want to believe that you may not be particularly surprised given the position that you have taken and all the suggestions that you have offered over time. But then it's worth asking all over again. Did you expect that we will get to this stage, and will it get worse? Give us the analysis of why Naira seems to be on a free fall.
Yeah, thank you very much. First, I never expected that the situation could get this bad, because I'm one of the proponents of a market-driven exchange rate, given the limitations of the policy model or the policy regime that we had in the previous dispensation. All the issues around the foreign exchange, the crisis, the corruption, the round-tripping, and all of that, and the lack of transparency. But one did not know that the fundamentals are as bad as they have turned out to be. Because for some of these economic reforms, you need some minimum level of economic fundamentals to support them. I'm talking now about this market-driven model. What has happened is that our reserves have been severely or profoundly or considerably depleted beyond what many of us could imagine. Because what we saw, what later was revealed about the status of the reserves was far worse than what we thought it was, or what was being reported on paper. Particularly after the disclosures that followed the audit reports, the series of audit reports of the Central Bank of Nigeria. And you need the reserves to support your currency. If there was no information as to how bad the situation was, perhaps the situation wouldn't have been as bad as it is. Because apart from the key elements of the fundamentals of the reserves that came into the open, there was the major, serious, speculative component of the demands that we are grappling with. So we are not only dealing with the demand pressure coming from the normal business activities. I'm talking now about manufacturers and business that need foreign exchange. On top of that, we are dealing with a very serious component, big component of speculative activities. So it's a double whammy. And that is what has, created this very serious crisis. And when you are in this kind of situation, it is difficult to go full throttle or to go to the extreme of a market-driven system because the fundamentals are not there to support it. On top of that, we have huge backlogs that have not been cleared. We have almost a total collapse of confidence in the system. So it has been difficult to also attract inflows into the foreign exchange market because to build your reserves, apart from your exports, I'm talking now about largely the oil exports, you also need inflows, and that is the way it is all over the world. You need inflows from foreign direct investors. You need inflows from portfolio investors. You need inflows from remittances, from diaspora, and so on and so forth. Because of the confidence crisis that we are dealing with in the foreign exchange market and the terrible signaling effect that all the maturing obligations that we are not able to meet are sent globally, all these things have combined together to create the kind of crisis that we find currently. So that is my understanding of what the situation is and where we are presently.
All right, good to see you, my dear brother and friend, Mr. Muda Yusuf. The first thing on my mind is the issue of what has happened over the last 24 hours, or let's say 48 hours. Over the last 48 hours, from around Wednesday, Thursday to Friday, and as of this morning, first, my major concern is pounds, not even dollars, because that's what I need most of the time for the family. And a number of people need dollars for their family. The nation is dollarized to a large extent. So my question will be, how do we begin to stem the tide in the free fall where dollar has gone as far as over 1,000 Naira to $1? And the expectation is those who are having a great time just scooping money, they're definitely not going to stop. Let me use the example of the pounds. On Wednesday, I asked for some pounds from a friend, and it was 1,280. Wednesday evening, it went to 1,320. Wednesday evening, it went to 1,390. By yesterday, it was 1,400. Before the close of business yesterday, it was 1,470. So as of this morning, the person said, oh, it's free fall, it's over 1,500. So if you want to buy now. So that is the situation because a lot of people don't have access to the I&E window. The banks are not selling. I've asked my friends in the bank, they're saying, we don't have. So how do we stem the tide in the time of scarcity of dollars, which people need in some cases for their livelihood and for their business?
Well, it's a very difficult situation because you cannot give what you don't have. If the fundamentals are weak, then whatever the superstructure that you want to put on it cannot stand. The challenge is that in the last dispensation, for instance, on a monthly basis, the central bank was able to support the Naira through its intervention mechanisms by between $1.5 to $1.3 billion every month. As we speak, I'm not sure the CBN is able to put in the markets up to 300 million or even 200 million, going by what I read in the recently released medium-term expenditure framework. So it's as if the CBN is completely absent in this equation. If the CBN was absent and we don't have a confidence crisis, then you can expect some other inflows to come in, to support the Naira. But the CBN is not there to be able to support the Naira as effectively as we expect the institution to do. And because of the confidence problem, other inflows are not coming in. So this has created a major crisis, which is what we're experiencing. And the issue of this kind of crisis, is a crisis of expectations, is something that reinforces itself. When you are in a particular crisis and you have an expectation that the situation may get worse, then there is a lot more panic. And that is what is resulting in this volatility. The CBN governor has said that the CBN will intervene from time to time. Again, it depends on what capacity it has to intervene. The main sources of our supply, first, the crude oil. I don't have enough, but I know that we are still grappling with output performance as far as the crude oil production is concerned because of the insecurity and all of that. We are still not able to meet our OPEC quota, although there has been some slight improvement. Now, the export proceeds, that is neither here nor there. That has not been material for a very long time because of the productive capacity of the economy and the competitiveness of our productive sector. So there is very limited, very limited amount of inflows that comes normally from export proceeds. Because we don't have any serious footprints as far as manufactured export is concerned. So most of our exports are primary products, agri products, and so on and so forth, which really doesn't come to much. The FDI, the portfolio flows, that is neither here nor there, because they thrive on confidence. So the only way out is if the government is in a position to leverage on some of its assets, and that has been, also put on the table as one of the options to see how we can use some of the assets to attract equity investment, because there's almost also a limit to which you can continue to borrow. Our debt profile now is around 87 trillion. That has its own challenge. So if you are looking in the direction of equity investment in some viable government institutions, especially in the oil and gas, that could be a way out. And the last resort, of course, is to approach the IMF for a bridging facility to stabilize our balance of payment situation. But the reality is that there is no quick fix to this situation. We can only get out of it to the extent that we're able to restore confidence in the system, to the extent that we're able to get a rebound in terms of our oil exports, to the extent that we're able also to reduce the pressure of demand on the foreign exchange market. Because the challenge we are dealing with is not just the challenge of supply, it's also the challenge of demand pressure, coming from things that ordinarily we should be producing locally. And the number one issue on the demand side is the importation of petroleum products. We are oil producing country, and look at how much we are spending. And that, of course, is a priority. Because you cannot afford a situation where there will be total collapse of energy supply in the economy. So the government naturally prioritizes the importation of petroleum products. So that is what it is.
All right. I mean, given what we now know, and now challenging the issue of our reserves is, you alluded to it earlier, do you think that it probably would have been a lot more efficient if the president had waited for the comprehensive auditing of the CBN before floating the Naira, as it were, at a time that Nigerians were, suddenly dealing with the effect of subsidy removal? If you recall, as at April and May this year, Naira to the dollar was at the official window. It was less than 500, and then at the parallel market about 700 plus. But here we are. We said that we have floated the Naira. I&E window jumped to 700, close to 800 plus, and now at the parallel market it's more than 1,000 Naira. We didn't achieve what we set out to achieve by having a single rate. We didn't achieve that, but at the same time, the Naira is now on a free fall. So I'm asking, do you think that it would have been wiser, maybe that's a better word, for the president to have waited and see what the rot was with the CBN before diving into that pronouncement and policy at the time that, subsidy was being removed?
Yes, I will agree with you. Because in matters like this, timing is also very important. We need to be strategic with timing. And we also need to be strategic with the information that is put in the public space. Not many people knew that the situation with the reserves and with the situation with the CBN was as bad as it is. So there's an issue for me, with the decision to release all those information at the time those information, was released. Because that now opened, the whole system to all sorts of analysis and projections, which also drives some of this decision. Because expectations are key, in the economic space. Expectations drive economic decisions. So, of course, the release of those information at the time they were released, I think, possibly, I'm not saying that there should not be disclosure, but perhaps the timing could have been done differently. I also agree with you that to properly float a currency, you need the fundamentals to support it. Now, the fundamentals are very weak. And when you float a currency in the context of very weak fundamentals, then you are likely to have the kind of free fall that you have, coupled with the information that was made available to economic players as to how the situation was with the reserves. I agree with you. I think there is something to say about timing. There is something to say about strategy. And knowing what we now know, I think we need to be very careful not to go to the other extreme of a market-driven system. Not to go to the other extreme of trying to get the official window to chase the parallel market. If we continue to do that, I think that will create even more chaos and more anxiety in the system. So there has to be some way to manage the system, even though we may have to be dealing with the challenges of divergence between the official and the parallel market window. Maybe we have to deal with that for some time, rather than surrender the currency entirely and completely to market forces. I don't think that will be nice for the economy, psychologically, perception-wise, and in terms of also expectation and level of confidence in the economy. Because no economic management policy model is absolute. We have to look at our context and design the policy framework, the policy model, or economic management model to suit our peculiar circumstances. Nothing should be absolute. Even in the United States, which is the embodiment of free enterprise, occasionally there are aberrations in terms of government interventions. We saw the way the government intervened to save the auto industry in 2008 with almost $15 billion. I'm talking of the United States now. Ideally, that is an aberration in a free enterprise economy. For a government to be using the government funds to bail out a private sector endeavors. But it did, to save the auto industry. The same thing during COVID. The US government spent over $50 billion to save the airlines. So these are interventions, and again, we have to situate everything within the context of the environment. And again, there's something also peculiar about our economy. I don't believe that all the funds that are chasing the dollar are actually legitimate funds. I don't believe that most of these things are coming from entrepreneurs or people who genuinely, want to demand the dollar just to do some, legitimate things. There are also possibilities that we have a lot of illicit funds in the system. Whether we like it or not, there's still a lot of corruption. I mean, it's pervasive. Because when you have a system where the political class are generally wealthier than the business class, this is something to worry about. So it is possible that a lot of these funds are also coming from all manner of places that don't care about whatever the rate is, and they are ready to mop up the currency. These are also possibilities, although we don't have data to support that. But knowing our economy and knowing the structure of the polity, it's also possible that some of these illicit funds are so much in abundance that they are also creating problems in the foreign exchange market.
Okay.
So I agree with you. Timing is key. Strategy is also key.
Okay. So in the street parlance, a number of people are cracking jokes or just being funny, saying that there is a magical wand somewhere because they use the street parlance, idon. And in using that idon as the street parlance, what magic do you think this government can do to ensure that we are able to get the economy back on track? Because at the moment, it is clear that it's not just the dollars that is struggling or the Naira that is struggling. Our economy across board is struggling. Farm, problem. Education, problem. Business, problem. Manufacturers, problem. So it is problem everywhere, whether we like to say it or not, because some people don't even want us to say it. They say, oh no, you're demarketing Nigeria when you say some of these things. But if we don't say the truth to ourselves, it means that we can't handle the truth. And we've got to be able to get to grips with the truth. So please help us speak the truth to this power that we have in Nigeria. What are the top 3 things you will say that need to be done from a private sector perspective that will help to make the economy begin to shift towards the center rather than this free fall that we have across board?
Well, you talked about magic wand or idon. Well, I don't think there is any magic wand that you can use at this moment, especially in the near term. Things have to be the way they are before they get better. Efforts are being made to fix the situation. And just as I said, the biggest issues are the macroeconomic issues, coming especially from the fact that our currency, the value of our currency is being gradually or sharply, even considerably eroded. And the only things we can do, I will have to repeat myself, is whatever we can do on the supply side of this equation and what you can do on the demand side of the equation. Because at the center of all of this is the fact that the economy is highly import dependent and therefore highly vulnerable to the challenges of exchange rate volatility. That is what it is. Now, the government have been doing a lot trying to fix the challenges in the oil producing area. If we're able to make progress with that, and given the fact that oil prices at an all-time high now, getting close to 100, given what is happening geopolitically around the world, that is one window of opportunity. The other window, which may not be immediate, is what I talked about. The government has decided that NNPC should be a private company, should be a publicly quoted company. If we're able to accelerate the process and get it properly quoted, just as we have with Saudi Aramco, which has a value now of almost over $2 trillion US. And when Saudi government needed some money, they just sold just about maybe 2 or 3% of their shares. And they were able to raise over $20 billion US. NNPC is a very valuable asset if we properly manage it properly. If we disconnect it from political interference and interference from the bureaucracy, it could provide a very good leverage for us to get out of this. We also have our NLNG, which is one of the best performing enterprise that we have in Nigeria. It also has a lot of value. Nigeria has about 49% in terms of ownership of that institution. We can offer maybe 5% of that and be able to generate significant foreign exchange. The other option, of course, is for us to approach the IMF, just as I said, for a bailout in this kind of situation. But IMF naturally will give us conditions, some of which we may have to struggle with before we can get out of this. Then on the demand side, we need to address the issue of import substitution. Because again, we demand for too many things externally that we should not be demanding for. Earlier, you talked about people who have to pay school fees and all of that. Let us support our domestic tertiary institutions, even if they are private. Let us support them to be able to raise their standards so that our citizens will not have, particularly our elites, will not have the need or the pressure to be looking for dollars to be able to pay school fees abroad. It's possible. We are seeing a lot of private initiatives in tertiary education. What incentives are we giving them to make it easy for them to raise the standard and to make it a lot more affordable? What are we doing to support our even private, what concessions are we giving our private hospitals to reduce medical tourism? What incentives are we giving them in terms of tax, in terms of import duty and things like that? So we need to also support private initiatives that can reduce the demand, for foreign exchange. Then, of course, we have, the problem of the fuel. Again, that's a major failure of governance. Part of the thing that brought us to this mess is our failure to manage our oil and gas sector properly. We have refineries, 4 refineries, none of them has worked for close to 10 years. That is also unpardonable. And look at how much we are spending on importation of petroleum products. And look at the effect of that on our currency. The same thing with our power supply. If we had a stable power, why will people be demanding so much foreign exchange to import petroleum products, to buy diesel and to buy PMS? So all of these things are interrelated and they boil down to quality of economic management and quality of leadership. But unfortunately, a lot of things have gone wrong. And when things have gone wrong, it's not also very easy to fix them so quickly.
All right, very quickly before we let you go, sir, I just thought that you should speak more to the things that we're battling with and now we can quickly correct it so that the government does not appear to be making mistakes upon mistakes at a time that they are pushing out policies that are supposed to rescue Nigerians. You've rightly highlighted the fact that we're still importing fuel at a time that our refineries ought to be working, which is draining the forex provision. But we also have the CBN now returning for the 3 banned items, otherwise from the Forex. Now you have cement, you have rice, you have all those things back that will now be struggling for the scarce foreign exchange. Would you consider that to be a wise decision? A lot of people thought that we're at a time that we ought to be celebrating the fact that we are self-sufficient, in rice production and in cement. So much so that it's been touted that we are giving other parts of Africa. But now we are now asking people in that sector, in that ecosystem, to also join the queue to be looking for dollars. Was that smart?
No, let me also correct a few things. First, we have to define boundaries as far as policy formulation processes are concerned. Under the previous dispensation, the CBN has no respect for boundaries. The CBN was all over the place, combining monetary and fiscal policy. Now, the issue of what to import, what not to import, is not the responsibility of the Central Bank of Nigeria. It's a fiscal policy issue, which rests squarely with the fiscal authorities. And if you look at our fiscal policy documents, fiscal policy measures, even as recently as 2023, many of these items are listed there. Some of them are even under import prohibition. Refined vegetable oil is under import prohibition. Tomatoes, ketchup, tomato sauce, and all of that are under import prohibition. Rice has a import duty of 60%. Bagged cement is under import prohibition. All these generic drugs that are produced by our pharmaceutical company are under import prohibition. So when we make comment, we have to situate things within the appropriate context. If there are shortcomings in our fiscal policy, let us fix it within the context of fiscal policy. Many of the items already are attracting very high tariffs. The tariffs on iron and steel products is between 45 to 55%. And many other things, all these noodles and all of that, fruit juice, all of them are under import prohibition. So the focus should be on our fiscal policy. If there are gaps in the fiscal policy, let us fix it. We don't do the right thing the wrong way. I must give it to the former CBN governor. He was very passionate about local production, protectionism, and all of that. But sometimes he also went to the other extreme. I mean, you just have a list of items. It's not even properly defined. Because for you to define any item for import prohibition or whatever, you must highlight the HS code. Even the customs were getting confused. And you cannot have a parallel trade policy. The Ministry of Finance has a trade policy. We have a tariff book. We have tariff measure. The CBN also has a different list. You don't manage an economy that way. So from the point of view of policy normalization, I think it was a good thing to do. Okay. This thing should rest with the fiscal authorities. Right. The explanation that the CBN failed to give was that this is not a CBN responsibility, it is for the fiscal authorities. And the fiscal authorities should have come up with this argument.
All right.
That some of these things are already covered under our fiscal policy measures. And if there are things to fix, if there are more items to add to it, we add to it under our fiscal policy measures.
All right.
That is what should be, and that's my response to that.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Mr. Muda Yusu. It's always a pleasure to have you on the morning show. Thank you for the insight.